Yep, stuffing a piece of candy in my mouth. Chocolate covered, salted chocolate covered caramels. And they were a really good price at Aldi's. Bought some more chicken from Aldi's too. Best chicken I've had. I just can eat. I eat the whole family pack myself over the course of. I'm not one of those weirdos that can't eat food. If there's nothing growing on it, I'm fine. So it might be in my refrigerator for a week and a half. I change compartments, and I do think that that keeps the bacteria from growing. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know why it would. I like the idea. So, put that in my mouth. Let's go on. We are in the reading room. Yep. I'd have to say, let me see where half is. Yeah, we're not halfway through. Or we're not 3/4 of the way through. But we are 2/3 of the way through. Well, maybe we are. Hold on. We're almost 3/4 of the way through. What do you think? No, I don't think so. 2/3. But close. After today, I think so. So we left off. We didn't read the footnote. I didn't read the footnote. The footnote is Trujillista. Right? So the name is Trujillo. And I'm assuming the followers or whatever, we talked about this before, are Trujillistas. Trujillista. So the sentence was, avoidance, which was ironic considering Abelard was unmatched in maintaining the outward appearance of the enthusiastic Trujillista. But what was even more ironic was that Abelard had a reputation for being able to keep his head down during the worst of the regime's madness, for unseeing as it were. In 1937, for example, while the Friends of the Dominican Republic were parahealing Haitians and Haitian Dominicans and Haitian-looking Dominicans to death, while genocide was in fact in the making, Abelard kept his head, eyes, and nose safely tucked into his books. Let his wife take care of hiding his servants, didn't ask her nothing about it. And when survivors staggered into his surgery, with unspeakable machete wounds, he fixed them up as best he could without making any comments as to the ghastliness of their wounds, acted like it was any other day. Both as an individual and as an executive officer of his medical association, he gave unstintingly to the Partido Dominicano. He and his wife, who was his #1 nurse and his best assistant, joined every medical mission that Trujillo organized, no matter how remote the campo, and no one could suppress a guffaw better than Abelard when El Jefe won an election by 103%. What enthusiasm from the pueblo. When banquets were held in Trujillo's honor, Abelard always drove to Santiago to attend. He arrived early, left late, smiled endlessly, and didn't say nothing. Disconnected his intellectual warp engine and operated strictly on impulse power. When the time came, Abelard would shake El Jefe's hand, cover him in the warm effusion of his adoration. If you think the Trijillato was not homoerotic, then, to quote the priest, you got another thing coming. And without further ado, fade back into the shadow. A la Oscar's favorite movie, Point Blank. Kept as far away from El Jefe as possible. He wasn't under any delusion that he was Trujillo's equal or his buddy or some kind of necessary individual. After all, niggers who messed with him had a habit of ending up with a bad case of the deads. It didn't hurt that Abelard's family was not totally in El Jefe's pocket. that his father had cultivated no lands or negocios in geographic or competitive proximity to Hefe's own holding. His fuckface contact was blessedly limited. And here is another footnote. He wished that he could have also been, he wished that could also have been the case with his Balaguer contact. In those days, the demon Balaguer had not yet become the election thief, was only Trujillo's Minister of Education. You can see how successful he was at that job. And any chance he got to corner Abelard, he did. He wanted to talk to Abelard about his theories, which were 4 parts Gobineau, 4 parts Godard, and 2 parts German racial eugenics. The German theories, he assured Abelard, were all the rage of the continent. Abelard nods. I see. But you ask who was the smarter? No comparison. In a tables and ladders match, Abelard, the Cerebro del Cibao, would have did the Genio de Genocidio in about 2 seconds flat. Abelard and the failed cattle thief might have glided past each other in the halls of history if not for the fact that starting in 1944, Abelard, instead of bringing his wife and daughter to Hefe events as custom dictated, began to make a point of leaving them at home. He explained to his friends that his wife had become nervous and that Jacqueline took care of her, but the real reason for the absences was Trujillo's notorious rapacity and his daughter Jacqueline's off-the-hook looks. Abelard's serious, intellectual oldest daughter was no longer her tall, awkward flaquita self. Adolescence had struck with the fury, transforming her into a young lady of great beauty. She had caught a serious case of the hip-ass chest, a condition which during the mid-40s spelled trouble with the capital T to the R to the U to the J to the E-ho. Ask any of your elders and they will tell you Trujillo might have been a dictator, but he was a Dominican dictator, which is another way of saying he was a #1 Balaco in the country. Believe that all the Toto in the DR, Dominican Republic, was literally his. It's a well-documented fact that in Trujillo's Dominican Republic, if you were a certain class and you put your cute daughter anywhere near El Jefe, within the week she'd be mamando, his rapillo, like an old pro, and there would be nothing you could do about it. Part of the price of living in Santo Domingo, one of the island's best-known secrets. So common was the practice, so insatiable Trujillo's appetites, that there were plenty of men in the nation, hombres de calidad y posición, who, believe it or not, offered up their daughters freely to the failed cattle thief. Abelard, to his credit, was not one of them. As soon as he realized what was what, after his daughter started stopping traffic on Cayo El Sol, after one of his patients looked at his daughter and said, "You should be careful with that one," he pulled a Rapunzel on her ass and locked her in. It was a brave thing, not in keeping with his character, but he'd only had to watch Jacqueline preparing for school one day, big in body but still in child, God damn it, still a child, and the brave thing became easy. Hiding your doe-eyed, large-breasted daughter from Trujillo, however, was anything but easy, like keeping the ring from Sauron. If you think the average Dominican guy's bad, Trujillo was 5,000 times worse. Dude had hundreds of spies whose entire job was to scour the provinces for his next piece of ass. If the procurement of ass had been any more central to the Trujillato, the regime would have been the world's first colocracy, and maybe, in fact, it was. In the climate, hoarding your women was tantamount to treason. Offenders who didn't cough up the muchachas could easily find themselves enjoying the invigorating charm of an 8-shark bath. Let us be clear, Abelard was taking an enormous risk. It didn't matter that he was upper class or that he'd prepare the groundwork well, going as far as having a friend diagnose his wife as manic, then letting the word leak through the elite circles in which he ran. If Trujillo and company caught wind of his duplicity, they'd have him in chains and Jacqueline on her back in 2 seconds flat, which was why every time El Jefe shuffled down the welcome line, shaking hands, Abelard expected him to exclaim in that high, shrill voice of his, "Dr. Abelard Cabral, where is that delicious daughter of yours? I've heard so much about her from your neighbors." It was enough to make Abelard febrile. I'm not sure what that word is. Febrile. His daughter, Jacqueline, of course, had absolutely no idea what was at stake. Those were more innocent times, and she was an innocent girl. Getting raped by her illustrious president was the furthest thing from her excellent mind. She of his 2 daughters had inherited her father's brains, was studying French religiously because she had decided to imitate her father and go abroad to study medicine at the Faculté de Médecine de Paris. To France to become the next Madame Curie, hit the books night and day, and would practice her French with both her father and with their servant Esteban El Gallo, who'd been born in Haiti and still spoke a pretty good frog. There's the next footnote, okay? After Trujillo launched the 1937 genocide of Haitian and Haitian Dominicans, you didn't see that many Haitian types working in the Dominican Republic. Not until at least the late 50s. Esteban was the exception because A, he looked so damn Dominican, and B, during the genocide, Socorro had hidden him inside her daughter Astrid's dollhouse, spent 4 days in there, cramped like a brown-skinned Alice. Neither of his daughters had any idea, were as carefree as hobbits, never guessing the shadow that loomed on the horizon. On his days off, when he wasn't at the clinic or in his study writing, Abelard would stand at his rear window and watch his daughters at their silly children's game until his aching heart could stand it no more. Each morning before Jackie started her study, she wrote on a clean piece of paper, "Tarde benintibus ossa." Tarde, after beniantibus ossa. To the latecomers are left the bones. Oh, okay, there you go. He spoke of these matters to only 3 people. The first, of course, was his wife, Socorro. Socorro, it must be said here, was a talent in her own right, a famous beauty from the East, Higuay, and the source of all her daughters' pulchritude. Socorro had looked in her youth like a dark-hued Deja Thoris, one of the chief reasons Abelard had pursued a girl so beneath his class, and was also one of the finest nurse practitioners he had ever had the honor of working with in Mexico or the Dominican Republic, which, given his estimation of his Mexican colleagues, is no small praise. The second reason he'd gone after her. Her workhorseness and her encyclopedic knowledge of folk cures and traditional remedies made her an indispensable partner in his practice. Her reaction, though, to his Trujillo worries was typical, as she was clever, skilled, hardworking woman who didn't blink when faced with arterial spray hissing from a machete-chopped arm stump. All right, here. Her reaction, though, to Trujillo worries was typical. She was a clever, skilled, hardworking woman who didn't blink when faced with arterial spray hissing from a machete-chopped arm stump. But when it came to more abstract menaces like, say, Trujillo, she stubbornly and willfully refused to acknowledge there might be a problem, all the while dressing Jacqueline in the most suffocating of clothes. Why are you telling people that I'm loca? She demanded. He spoke of it as well as with Mistress Senora Lydia Abinader. Abnadir, one of the three women who had rejected his marriage offer upon his return from the studies in Mexico. Now a widow and his number one lover, she was the woman his father had wanted him to bag in the first place, and when he'd been unable to close the deal, his father had mocked him as a half man even unto his final days of bilious life, the third reason he'd gone after Socorro. Last, after he spoke his longtime neighbor and friend, Marcus Applegate Roman, whom he often had to ferry back and forth from presidential events because Marcus lacked a car. With Marcus, it had been a spontaneous outburst, the weight of the problem truly pressing on him. They'd been cruising back to La Vega on one of the old marine occupation roads, middle of the night in August, through the black farmlands of the Cibao, so hot they had to drive with the windows cranked down, which meant a constant stream of mosquitoes scooting up their nostrils, and out of nowhere Abelard began to talk. Young women have no opportunity to develop unmolested in this country, he complained. Then he gave as an example the name of a young woman who the Jefe had only recently despoiled, a muchacha known to both of them, a graduate of the University of Florida and the daughter of an acquaintance. At first Marcus said nothing. In the darkness of the Packard's interior, his face was an absence, a pool of shadow, a worrisome silence. Marcus was no fan of the Jefe, having more than once in Abelard's presence called him un bruto y un imbecile. But that didn't stop Abelard from being suddenly aware of his colossal indiscretion. Such was life in those secret police days. Finally, Abelard said, "This doesn't bother you?" Marcus hunched down to light a cigarette, and finally his face reappeared, drawn but familiar. "Nothing we can do about it, Abelard. But imagine you were in similar straits. How would you protect yourself? I'd be sure to have ugly daughters." Lydia was far more realistic. She'd been seated at her armoire, brushing her Moorish hair. He'd been lying on the bed naked as well, absently pulling on his ripio. Lydia had said, "Send her away to the nuns. Send her to Cuba. My family there will take care of her." Cuba was Lydia's dream. It was her Mexico, always talking about moving back there. But I need permission from the state." "Ask for it then." "But what if El Jefe notices the request?" Lydia put down her brush with a sharp click. "What are your chances of that happening?" "You never know," Abelard said defensively. "In this country, you never know." His mistress was for Cuba, his wife for house arrest. His best friend said nothing. His own cautiousness told him to await further instructions, and at the end of the year, he got them. At one of the interminable presidential events, El Jefe had shaken Abelard's hand, but instead of moving on, he paused. A nightmare come true, held on to his fingers and said in his shrill voice, "You are Dr. Abelard Cabral?" Abelard bowed. "At your service, Your Excellency." In less than a nanosecond, Abelard was drenched in sweat. He knew what was coming next. The failed cattle thief had never spoken more than 3 words to him his whole life. What else could it be? He dared not glance away from Trujillo's heavily powdered face, but out the corner of his eye he caught glimpses of the lambasacos hovering, beginning to realize that an exchange was in the making. "I have seen you here, Doctor, but lately without your wife. Have you divorced her?" "I am still married, Your Enormity, to Socorro Hernandez Batista." "That is good to hear," El Jefe said. "I was afraid that you might have turned into un maricon." Then he turned to the lambasacos and laughed. "Oh, Jefe," they screamed, "you are too much." It was at this point that another nigger might have, in a fit of cajones and something to defend his honor. But Abelard was not that nigger. He said nothing. But of course, Alhefe continued, knuckling a tear from his eye. You are no Marcone, for I've heard that you have daughters, Dr. Cabral. Un que es muy bella y elegante, no? Abelard had rehearsed a dozen answers to this question, but his response was pure reflex, came out of nowhere. Yes, Jefe, you are correct. I have 2 daughters, but to tell you the truth, they are only beautiful if you have a taste for women with mustaches. For an instant, El Jefe had said nothing, and in that twisting silence, Abelard could see his daughter being violated in front of him while he was lowered with excruciating slowness into Trujillo's infamous pool of sharks. But then, miracle of miracles, El Jefe had crinkled his porcine face, I'm not sure, and laughed. Abelard had laughed too, and El Jefe moved on. When Abelard returned home to La Vega late that evening, he woke his wife from a deep slumber so that they could both pray and thank the heavens for their family's salvation. Verbally, Abelard had never been quick on the draw. The inspiration could only have been from the hidden spaces within my soul, he told his wife, from a numinous being. You mean God? His wife pressed. I mean someone, Abelard said darkly. Okay, that's what I am into the next section, and so we are on part 3, and we are on chapter 5. And now, let me see here in my judgment. Nope, we're not quite 3/4 of the way through. This is Dr. Annette Feravich, though, and we have been in the classroom. This is the reading room, reading this wonderful book for older kids, right? Grade 7 and above, but an excellent, excellent book. I just love it. I love it. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me. I will see you on Tuesday, day 99 of the classroom. Thanks.